Okay, folks, how's it going? This will just be a quick video here, and I'm going to just, explain briefly the difference between additive and subtractive drawing when we're dealing with these structural crating forms. And again, this is really meant for later on when you're working on the combination of, cubic and cylindrical forms. And just for your info, off here to the side, you can't see it, but I've actually got the reference here for the two things from the bulletin. Now again, you don't have to use these. This is just sort of there if you need them or you want them. And you can, of course, simplify these a little bit as needed. But I've got these here off to the side that I'm going to be looking at, so just be aware of that as you're watching, okay? So the first thing I want to talk about is subtractive. Now, subtractive means you are taking away from parts of the image. So in this case, you would start off with a big cube that is more or less the proportions of what you're trying to do. So I'm going to go ahead and draw that now. There's my anchor line. And again, I'm looking at the reference as I'm doing this. So I'm going to make a block that's about hopefully you guys can, this is showing up fairly well with the colored pencil. I just kind of like drawing in colored pencil sometimes. Okay. So I'm going to, and remember it's important to follow these steps. So here are the 5 steps that we've been over in class before. Hopefully you guys know these by heart by now. So I started off with my anchor line, then my front angle, then the back angle parallel to the front. Then I do the height of the box, so that I have my X, Y, and Z axis here. And then you do the top of the box parallel to the bottom. Again, everything on this axis is parallel, everything on this axis is parallel, and then everything on the vertical axis should all be parallel with each other. Okay, and notice how big I'm drawing here, all right? I'm not drawing these tiny little forms. So you should practice doing some of these larger because that's what we're going to be doing next week, is starting to draw larger. All right, it's a whole different challenge drawing something large than it is drawing small, okay? So here's our basic cube. And again, I'm just going to pick, I think I'm going to do letter E. Actually, I'll do J. I'll do J from the examples here. All right, so what I'm going to do first is, again, this is subtractive. So I start off with a big square, and then I'm going to take chunks away. So imagine almost as if this was like a block of wood or a block of marble, and I'm going to chisel away. I'm going to try to visualize the form I want to make inside, and then I'm going to kind of chisel away, so to speak, the excess. But I'm going to do it with lines, of course. I don't really have a block of marble here. But all right, so looking at this form here, this is a pretty simple one. I'm just going to kind of start to sketch out parts of the form that I'm seeing on this side. So I kind of have this L shape here. And again, this is letter J in that initial bunch of reference. So I have an L shape here. And then this shape kind of comes across and goes over to about here. And all I'm really doing now is just kind of subdividing the form, and I'm kind of drawing inside a little bit. Then this corner comes inward. Again, I'm trying to keep everything parallel along each axis. All right, then this comes about there. And then this comes out a little bit. Now, it looks like I've maybe got a little more, just a little bit. I came maybe a little too big with this, but that's okay. Again, these don't have to match exactly, so it's fine for what we're doing. And then this kind of comes across here. All right. And then this part kind of comes back over, meets up with this corner somewhere in here. This part is going to come down and then go across all the way to the far corner here. And then somewhere in there where this corner meets, we're going to go up from there. Now this is trickier than it looks, all right? If your lines are not parallel, you're going to have problems with these corners and edges matching up, okay? But notice what I'm doing here. I am drawing through the forms. Everything is transparent, right? Everything is, you know, see-through, so I can see all my back edges. And I'm just sort of, again, kind of blocking out, kind of drawing inside the box. I'm using this as a sort of a starting point, and I'm going inward and drawing this. And so now, and I'm checking the reference to make sure it matches up, and it's pretty close. Again, I had this little problem here with this maybe coming out a bit too far, but that's a very minor issue. All right. So once I have gotten this looking correct, then my next step is going to be darkening my final lines. And again, if anything is off, if anything is not parallel, I want to fix it. And again, it's important that you leave your back edges in. Then this comes out. And as I darken these lines, it's going to be easier to see the final form start to take shape here. And then essentially what we're going to be doing, once we get this all darkened, is we're not going to literally erase it, but we're going to kind of ignore. In a regular drawing, we would kind of erase the rest of this. All right, see, now we don't need all of this anymore. So hopefully this, you can see what's going on here. And so, this isn't necessary, but like just for emphasis, I'm going to shade the final parts of the form in here. Remember, there's no shading on a structure drawing, only line quality. But this is to help you see what the final form looks like. Okay? And then the rest of this, all of this, in a regular drawing, you would just erase it. You wouldn't need it anymore. But because this is a structure drawing, I want to at least leave the foundation lines still visible so we can see how the forms were built up. All right, and again, if we look at the original, which is, this example J, which is right here, okay, that pretty much matches that. Again, this comes out a little further than it should because my box was a little bit longer, but again, these don't have to match exactly, so that's fine. All right, so that's subtractive. I started off with a big block, then I essentially subdivided. I basically pick one side to start from, and usually this front side here is the easiest. I looked at the reference, I looked at the shapes, this kind of backwards L shape. I started with that, and then I extrapolated from there, drew into the block, kept all of my subdivisions parallel where they needed to be with the X, Y, and Z axis, and then I kind of darkened the final area. So let's do additive this time. All right, so that's subtractive. Hopefully that made sense. Now let's do an additive one. So additive is, I guess, another word for modular, which means you have parts that connect to one another. And let's switch over to one of these more complicated ones here. Let's do the combination of the ellipse and the, okay. I think I'm gonna just go with this first one here, number 1, okay? And again, these you can change these up. These can differ slightly from what's there. All right, so for additive, I'm gonna just start off with a basic cubic form. And I've kind of got this long basic shape here for the base. All right, so now I'm going to do the height. Again, everything on X is parallel, everything on Y is parallel, everything on Z is parallel. And you're going to find if your initial box is a little off, that's kind of normal, unless you're really good at visualizing. So if you need to go back and change the shape of it a little bit later, that's okay. All right, so I've got this basic form here. And now I'm going to start, adding on to it, doing an additive process. I've got this part that sticks out. So I'm going to go ahead and start marking off certain areas of it. So this will partially be subtractive, okay? But then right around here, I'm going to actually add on. I'm going to move this up a bit to there. All right, I've got this part that juts out here. So I'm going to, and again, keep anything extra that you're adding on parallel where necessary. Make sure we've got the bottom square parallel looking good. Okay. Then I'm going to come across here, go down on this side, carry through. I'm going to always draw the back edges of things. What I do to one side, I'm going to do the other side, even if I can't see it. These lines are getting a little off, so I need to make sure they're nice and parallel. And when you're in this stage of the drawing, things might start looking a little ambiguous, and you got, a bunch of lines crossing over each other, and it might get kind of confusing. So just, it does require some concentration to make sure that you're doing things the right way. All right, I've got this part that comes in here. Oh, wait a minute. Hold on a second. Oh, I see. I need to add on to this part as well. See, I missed that. This forms an L shape. So I've got to modify what I've done. See? This happens to even when you have some experience at this, it can get tricky. So I just needed to go up a little bit with that. But no problem. So then I'll come across there. Then I'll come down here. And then I'll come across there. Okay. So there we go. And again, this doesn't quite match exactly what the other one is. It's a little longer, but no biggie. These are all just practice, so it's not a huge deal. Okay, so we've got that on one side. And then this on the other. We've got two kind of opposing L shapes there. Now we just want to start, again, we don't want to erase anything in this drawing, if we can help it. Unless it's just a glaring, distracting mistake. That's why you want to start off these drawings kind of faint. Remember the 3 L's, light, loose, and large. And that way you can darken your final lines. Okay. Sorry, this table's a little wobbly. Hopefully that's not making the video look too shaky. I should be doing this on a sturdier table. Okay. So now we can start to see it taking shape. If I really wanted to make it completely match what's there, I would actually shorten this. I'd actually cut that almost in half and then take it through to the other side. But, it's fine. Now we've got a couple of cylindrical forms here. These are just holes that are drilled into whatever this form is. But I'm going to actually make them protrude outward. And I'm going to, change it up a bit. So first thing I'm going to do to make an ellipse here is I'm going to draw a square. But the trick is this square has to be parallel with the larger forms that we are drawing, right? So I draw the bottom, I subdivide. Again, the diagonal ones are optional. I find them handy, but if you don't want to draw them, at least draw these. Then draw your arcs from point to point. And remember, you want a nice smooth ellipse. No points, no bulges. Shouldn't look like a football or a teardrop or whatever. Okay. And now, if I don't want to make this if I want to make this a hole going inward, I would actually draw lines going down into the base. But I want to have it coming up. So I'm going to go the opposite direction from the corners. I'm going to go upward, like so. And I'm not going to go really tall with it. Like, I'll take it to about here, just so it's not going over other lines and making it confusing. That's the nice thing about these drawings, is that you can kind of just make decisions about where you want things. Now we want to subdivide again, and we want to make sure that our center axis, if I draw a parallel line straight up from the center, I want to make sure that that axis lines up. So that line was a little off. I'm scooching it over a bit to there. And if those axes are lined up, I should have a nice straight cylinder that I can then just connect the edges to. All right, that's a little wonky, but it'll do. Now I'm going to do another one. Or maybe I'll do two. We'll see. Sticking out of this part here. So I'm just going to draw some parallel lines. Space them out a little bit. And then I'm going to draw a couple vertical lines to cut off the squares like so. All right. Subdivide like that. Draw my ellipses. I'm going a little fast here, but that's okay. Okay. Now I'm going to come out from the corners, but again, I'm going to keep these lines parallel with everything else on this axis. Right, just like that. And again, if you're drawing a really long cylinder, you might want to put an extra segment in the middle. I find that helpful to keep things straightened up. There we go. And again, you want to make sure those center axes are lined up. So when you find the midpoints on each of these, kind of do it faintly and do a test and see if you can draw a parallel line through those three parts. If those line up, then you're in good shape. And these pretty much line up. So I'll take it. Then you connect the edges, darken the ends. And now we've got one cylinder kind of sticking out this way. This one you can, let's make it go inward just for fun. So I'm going to actually be drawing inside the form now. I'm going inward. So same process, but we're just going the other direction. I'm going to draw an end to that form. Subdivide. Make sure my center axes line up, like so. And I'm not, we don't really need to worry about the edges too much, but now we've got, I'm going to darken that little sliver of the inside circle, ellipse. So there we go. So now I've got one coming out, and then I've got a hole going inward. Now, if I wanted to come all the way through the other side, I would have needed to make sure I extended this to, out here where I knew I was going through. So I'm pretty close to that. And, I could keep adding on to this, but, as you can see, the difference between these two approaches. Right? So in this one, I started off with a big block, and I started carving away stuff. This one I started off with a form or a block, and I just keep adding stuff onto it, adding forms onto it. And I could keep going. I could add, I could subdivide here and, add another part, going that way. you know, ad infinitum. But you don't have to, you know, do that much to these. I mean, you can keep them pretty simple. The key is to just do enough of them, do a bunch so that, you know, you get the hang of it. All right, so there's another part I added on, and you can just keep going and going. Go up, go to the sides, whatever. Okay? So that's additive and subtractive. I hope this was helpful. And again, I took one of these examples. I took this first example here, and I changed it up, right? I added on to it. I changed the shape of it. So you're allowed to do that. And if any of these look cool, but maybe they're a little too complex, then simplify them a little bit, and that's totally fine. Okay? All right, so I hope this was helpful for you. If you have any questions, of course, you can always ask me, but there we go. So until next time, later.